Around 7 years ago, I found myself in a place in which I felt like I did not belong and I needed to adjust and hide parts of myself to fit in. And with this deep desire to belong, I started to please other people and try to be perfect and overworked myself constantly. And it led to the situation in which I felt like I could not go on this path of self-expression any longer unless I radically changed something. And this is crazy to think about because I always felt like I was a creative person and my creative self-expression has always been very important to me. At 4 years old, I started to play the piano. At 6, I started to compose for the orchestra. And as a teenager, I wrote a lot of poetry, and at 17, I started to take drawing seriously, and then I started to study interior architecture. And in trying to be perfect and trying to please, I didn't think that this was the issue, but that I was overworking myself because I wasn't working effectively enough. So the first thing I started to do was I tried to implement new habits, and I read a lot about productivity. I listened to podcasts and watched a lot of YouTube on the topic of productivity. And at some point I actually tried to implement a new habit every month for a year. And at the same time I knew that I had to take better care of my health and started to meditate and do yoga. But I didn't do it for the spiritual reasons that I do it now, but I thought that this was also a tool to regulate my nervous system so I could be more productive. And I think this all stems from this pattern of thinking in a society that we always need to be productive, that this is the most important thing in capitalism, obviously, and that everything that is emotional and intuitive and sensitive does not belong in this workplace. And for me, this was in university at art school, and I felt like I needed to be tougher and my sensitive side wasn't accepted. And it was always about being the toughest person and about being the most productive person. And I think in every creative field, if it is art or design or music, to be sensitive is not a weakness as I thought then, but actually a strength, because art and creative expression is always about being emotional, being vulnerable, but also about understanding other people and relating to other people. And it is always emotional. And so I was in this place and I tried to work around this issue of not feeling like I belonged and not being accepted by trying to be perfect and trying to please. And I tried to solve the situation by being more productive, but at some point my health was in such bad shape, or I was in such bad shape that I needed to rearrange my priorities. So I started to make my health the most important thing in my life, and everything else came second to that. And this allowed me to take a lot of time and space to take care of my body, but also to do the inner work. And it led to a more spiritual life, I would say. But I also felt like when I want to be in a good place with my health and my spiritual side, my productive side and my creative side relating to outlet needs to be second. And every time I needed to be more productive and wanted to focus on getting things done, my health had to come second. So there wasn't any balance between the two, but I only allowed one part at a time. And this switched, I switched between these two ways of living my life back and forth for a couple of years, and I felt like I was in a good place with my health, but I didn't achieve all the things that I wanted to creatively, and I still felt like I wasn't expressing myself authentically 100%. Which is a hard thing to do because we are always in reflection with other people, and when you are constantly met with criticism and other people telling you that how you express yourself is not the right way, it is very hard to stay true to yourself. And I think I grew a lot in this time, but there wasn't any balance, as I said, and in 2020 I fell back into this old pattern, I think, of trying to please again. I distanced myself from pleasing other people, but as I said, it was very hard because I was constantly confronted with the criticism, and I felt like I wasn't in a safe space to express myself authentically, fully. And so in 2020, I fell back into the same loop of trying to please, and it was very hard to stand my ground. I think especially because it was an emotional time and it was a difficult time, and to try to stay productive and take care of your emotional side and your mental health was difficult for everybody, I think. But I felt like I still needed to function a lot at my university. And all this to say, I don't think that this is the experience at art school in general, and I don't even think that most people at my art school felt this way about their experience, but this is my personal experience and how it was for me. And maybe I am more sensitive, but maybe I'm also just more in touch with my emotions. I don't know. And maybe I just don't know how others' experience was, because in the surrounding or in the situation, I think most people aren't that honest about how they actually feel about the experience. And so 2020, I fell back into this cycle of trying to please, and I thought that I was responsible in the way I was communicating to make others understand me, even though other people did not really want to understand me or want to understand the way I express myself. And I was very hard on myself for not being as productive as I wanted to be, even though this is an emotional time and it was important to me to take care of my mental health. And in 2021, in the beginning of the year, I noticed that I was back in this place where I focused so much on my productivity and what other people think, that I again felt like I needed to make a radical shift, and I decided that I wanted to make my main focus not my health as it was before, or my productivity as it was before, but to make my main focus to be in my flow and follow my intuition. This was in a time where I needed to get a lot of things done and I had a lot of work to do, but still my focus wasn't on being productive, but on following my needs, my emotions, my intuition. And a day in my life looked like working, but then getting up and dancing to music because I felt like it, going to take a shower in the middle of the day because I felt like it. And in this time, I got into this deep state of flow that I never experienced before. And it lasted for a long time. And I had this one day, which was actually like a spiritual awakening in a sense, because I was in this flow state and in the present moment for hours. And even when I shifted into different activities that I did, I still stayed in this flow state of being completely present and in my body. I was reading things, I was writing things, I was dancing, I was showering, I was meditating, and still in all these activities, even when I was working productively, I was in a constant state of flow and in a constant state of presence in my body. And this was the most extreme experience of flow that I have experienced until that point. But even when it wasn't that extreme, and on other days I still had this flow in my day, and I knew how to switch. I kind of learned how to switch in between these different states of being very focused and productive and clear, and being intuitive and in alignment with my emotions and in flow and creative. And in that time, I saw that both of these states and ways of doing things and ways of being needed to belong to each other. Before that, in the 6 years prior to that, I was always focusing on one thing or the other, but never truly knew how to combine these two states to allow myself to be emotional and still be productive. I always felt like they were separate. And this is how, for me, the concept of these two poles that I am now talking about in my course Creative Waters, and which is the foundation of the course, made most sense. And I think it is a polarity. It's not binary, but they are opposite, but essentially belong together. And these two states, these two energies, I think a lot of people, and in astrology it is called the polarity between feminine and masculine energy. In the spiritual community, a lot of people are talking about divine feminine, divine masculine energy, which does not relate to gender, but is this thinking about the energy, the essence of these two states. And I think I learned about the concept later on, but it clicked for me because I had experienced this switch, this interplay, this balance between those two. And yes, so this was how my way of my creative process was born, I think. And all the years prior to that were important and informed the way I do things. All the methods I learned on productivity, I changed to fit into taking care of yourself emotionally and still acting in this intuitive and in flow state. So at the same time, in this whole situation, even after finding this way of living my creative process in a way that aligned with me and let myself express all parts of me, I still did not feel like I could express myself fully in the space that I was in. I still did not feel safe expressing myself fully in the spaces I was in. So in the last year, 2021, I committed to creating spaces for myself in which I felt safe to express myself more and more, and also stepping outside of my comfort zone, because I knew by expressing myself vulnerably, authentically, I am making myself vulnerable to the criticism or the opinions of other people. But as long as I am not true to myself and I do not express myself creatively in the way that I am, authentically in my heart, other people will not see me for the person that I am. So this was a time of committing to that, and I did a lot of things to commit to that. And in that same time, for me, this desire to also create a safe space, not only for me, but also for other people to feel safe and be met with very sensitive and empathic feedback and criticism to grow in a space in which they feel safe to fully express themselves and are not forced to hide parts of themselves in order to be productive or successful in the way that our society thinks that you are productive and successful. The desire to create these spaces grew and grew, and that's how my course, Creative Waters, and this whole journey that I am on now came to be. I felt like I wanted to give the same safe space, which I now want to give in Creative Waters in the course, and share all the knowledge that I have gained throughout this journey. I feel like for me to have, in the beginning of my journey 7 years ago, I felt like I did not have a person that I identified with and looked up to. And last year I found people that I look up to, even though it is mostly online and on social media. It's still, I have found a wonderful mentor, Daisy, who helped me so much to grow in an area in my life in which I felt like I could not grow on my own, and I did not want to struggle any longer. So for me, in sharing my knowledge, I also want to help you to not have to go through the same journey as I did, not have to struggle as much, but gaining a lot of knowledge in a short period of time to make your own. And with everything that I'm saying, it is not, for me, my course Creative Waters is not about teaching a certain way of doing things that you need to adapt one-on-one, but to give you the tools to find your own way of doing things, and a space in which to experiment with what you want to do. And I have a lot of tips, I have a lot of knowledge in how to work creatively, and I think I also tried out so many different media that I can also help you in a lot of different ways to express yourself. What I am talking about is not so much about which craft you use and which tools you use, but more about how your whole process and your whole structure is built. Yes, I think that kind of nicely ties up everything that I learned and wanted to share today. And this also is very vulnerable for me to share this, and I think a year ago I would never have thought about sharing this whole journey in this way, but I feel like it's important to also share this very personal experience for you to understand where I'm coming from and what to expect. Thank you for listening, if you have listened until now, and see you soon.